For 19 years, my home was where I had grown up my entire life. I grew up in Oslo, Norway, and while I always dreamt about places much further away, this was still my home. I never really moved growing up, so this was all I knew. Because Scandinavians travel a lot, it wasn't the only place I had been, but it was the only place I had truly lived. Growing up in Norway was in many ways growing up in a bubble. I got out of this bubble when I moved to California. When I went to college on the other side of the world, the definition of home became confusing to me. I fell in love with a place and a culture I had only experienced for a short amount of time. If I'm gonna be completely honest, it only took me that first day from when I moved into the dorms to know that I had made the best decision of my life. This wasn't the confusing part, this was the very confident part. The confusing part was my first trip home that Christmas. Going home felt like a relief in many ways. I was finally able to go home and relax, and go home to what I was used to. I was able to eat a home-cooked meal, reconnect with my friends whom I had grown up with, and go back to some of my old habits. It was easy, which was the complete opposite of what my last 6 months had looked like. Moving across the world to start a whole new life when you're barely an adult is scary. You still feel like a teenager who doesn't know much about the world, but trusting your intuition that you'll figure it out. You're alone, you left your friends and family, and it's your job to figure out what that means. Your first year is over, and you realize that the place that you've been calling home for the last year is no longer your home. And because you don't live in this country and you don't have enough money to pay for a storage unit, you need to throw away a lot of items you bought only a couple of months ago, only to buy them again in a few months. Going back that summer was a bit weird. I felt my friends in Norway couldn't relate to my experience in California, and my friends in California couldn't relate to my experience having to go back to the country I was from. This was when I started feeling in between. I felt out of place in Norway because I didn't look like most people there, and because I never felt I could be the most authentic version of myself. I felt out of place in California because I didn't grow up there. English wasn't my first language, and the education system was very different. I felt out of place in Norway because you were taught to not stand out and to not have dreams that weren't realistic. But I also felt out of place again in California because I felt people cared too much about something like their status and less about building real relationships with people. I realized that my life needed balance. I wanted to split my time between California and Norway more. I wanted to focus on the parts that I loved about each culture and embrace why that would make me unique. It's now been 4 years since I've been back in Norway, and the longest I've ever been away from home. I never meant for it to become this long. There were challenges that restricted me from traveling, the pandemic being one of them. I also had just graduated from college, I had gotten a job in my career, and I had less free time. As I'm writing this, I'm realizing that growing up is not about where you live, which job you have, or even about everything you've achieved. It's about growing as a person and using all the experiences, people, and places I interact with along the way as a tool to create a life that feels authentic to me. My life shouldn't be defined by one thing, place, or person. It should be defined by all the things that shape me, and my home to be wherever I feel I can be myself.